Hello, hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. I have been relaying some of the foundational pieces about resilience. I think it's just always a good reminder because we get caught in the busyness of life and we just sort of forget things. So I really talked about the need for stress and adversity. And that's a point that I feel like I need to mention again and again and again and again because we keep shielding kids from stress and adversity, and they're now not knowing how to regulate their emotions and to navigate the world. And so today I want to talk about the importance of challenging kids just enough. So even though, yes, they need stress, they need adversity, and just, like even if they were dumped in the deep end, they would figure their way out. But we don't need to do that. And I'm not saying that we're setting them up for failure or pushing them too far. It's really finding that enough, that perfect balance between things that are too easy and things that are too difficult. And this is like, everyday tasks to think about. So understanding how to provide the right level of challenge is really important so that we're not shutting them down, right? We want to have that nice balance. So we're fostering that motivation, that resilience, a love for learning. This is really what's called the zone of proximal development. And this gives us a framework for really understanding how to stretch kids in a supportive way. And, it's an effective way to build resilience as well, because we need to push them. We need to, if everything was easy peasy, they're not growing, right? They just go into autopilot and their brain is never going to change. It's really the Goldilocks principle of learning. I think we all know the story of Goldilocks and the three bears, right? Where she's finding the porridge that's just right, and the bed that's just right, and the chair that's just right. So the same principles really applies when it comes to challenging kids. Tasks that are too easy, it's quickly going to become boring and unengaging, right? They're just not going to be interested. They're not going to be motivated. And there's no learning happening, right? The brain isn't turning on to say, ooh, this is hard. Ooh, I'm making a mistake. Ooh, I better focus and pay attention so that I can learn. The brain isn't getting that feedback. So it's just kind of going through the motions. But on the other hand, tasks that are too difficult, that can be overwhelming. And now the emotional brain is taken over, and that's just going to cause frustration, anxiety, aggression, shutdown, whatever. And they're just going to give up. And again, kids are not going to learn. So that zone of proximal development, it's that sweet spot, the just right level of challenge, right? Where we're turning on the brain. It's not too easy. The brain is alerted. Ooh, okay, there's something going on here. I need to do something differently, right? This is new. This is harder. So it's looking at that range of things that a kid can perform with some guidance. And we're not doing it for them, right? It's that's the sweet spot where learning and development really happens, and resilience as well. Because now kids are pushed to stretch just beyond their current level of abilities and just beyond, so that they're not feeling overwhelmed. I almost like thinking of a ladder, right? The child is on one rung and the next rung up is within reach, but it requires a bit of effort. They need to reach, right? They need to grasp it. They need to pull themselves up. It's a little bit of effort. So our role is to guide them. Now, if they were climbing a ladder, let's assume they're above us anyways. There's nothing we can do. We're not going to climb for them. We're not going to pull them up. We're not going to push them up, right? We are there to sense that guide. And the most effective guides are really the ones we're going to validate their experience. We're going to show them we know that they're struggling, right? We're not going to get stuck in that. We only need to do one acknowledgement, like, yeah, that looks tricky. But we're going to show our confidence that they can do it. That's the most important response. We know this for resilience. We're supportive and validating their experience, but confident that they're going to figure it out. Okay. So we can't do it for them. We can't push. We can't pull. We can't tell them what to do either, because then they're never going to think for themselves. We don't want to reassure them or get into long, lengthy conversations. Just get them up that ladder. You might ask open-ended questions. That's how we're going to show confidence. So what are you going to do, right? I've got confidence that you're going to figure it out. Here's your question. What's next? What do you need to do? They need to start thinking for themselves. That's what being a good guide is. Okay. Now, challenges within that zone are really vital because they provide the right amount of cognitive or maybe physical challenge, that stretch that promotes growth and skill development. And it's really the balanced, okay? And it's important for so many reasons. I mean, it's promoting mastery and confidence. When children can successfully tackle that challenge and get to that next rung, they feel a sense of accomplishment, and that boosts their confidence and that encourages them to take on the new challenge to go to the next rung. Right? They do this in video games all the time. They can see themselves going through that progression. It's building resilience because encountering that challenge, being able to overcome that challenge all by themselves, that's teaching kids, well, effort and persistence are going to lead to success and that I can do it. Right. And when they've got enough of those experiences that I can do it by myself, that's going to help them navigate whatever future obstacles comes their way. And it's building that growth mindset. We don't sit and talk about growth mindset. We go and do, right? It helps sustain motivation as well. Kids are naturally motivated to engage and to go on to that next rung, whatever that is, right? When those tasks are achievable but still require effort. So we're keeping their interest engaged and they're invested in the learning process. It's encouraging problem solving. Challenging tasks encourage kids to think critically, right? They're going to experiment with different approaches. They're going to develop problem solving skills that are really important for academics, certainly for social success and just everyday life, right? Figuring things out. It's fostering independence. Working within their zone helps kids learn to rely on their abilities to figure it out. And so when they are doing it, we're not telling them what to do or pushing and pulling. It's going to boost their independence and their self-efficacy because they learn I'm capable of tackling whatever this new and difficult task is. Now, finding a child zone, it's not always straightforward. That's maybe the trickier piece, but there's strategies you can do to sort of gauge the right level of challenge. Start by observing them. Just look at what their current skills are. Pay really close attention to what they can do independently and where they start to struggle, right? Look for tasks that they can do almost all on their own, but may, need a little bit of that encouragement or a little bit of that guidance to finish. I will talk about the perseverance formula in the future. I think there's going to be just too much to think about right now. So right now it's just about knowing where does that initial level of frustration start to hit? Right. So maybe when they're riding a bike, it's when like they're great on the glider. We see this with little kids. They're great on the glider. They can steer no problem, but now we need to start coordinating the pedaling, right? That can be really tricky. So that's where frustration starts to hit. That's where the brain, as soon as frustration kicks in, that's awesome because that's where learning is going to start happening. And just so you know, I'm always talking about we know that doing something physical and inverted. So maybe kids are going to be practicing doing headstands or handstands, right? So they're going to start getting frustrated when they keep falling down, right? They can't get their legs up, they can't get their legs up, can't get their legs up. Now frustration kicks in. Perfect. We want to keep going. And this is part of that perseverance formula that I'm going to talk about in another episode. But if they can do that and persevere with that and then go do an academic task, their brain is already primed for learning. So even if they start with something physical, but now they've had the practice, okay, frustration kicks in, we're going to try a little bit more. Okay, so then we can really look at that. So when does that initial level of frustration start to hit? That's perfect. So we're in that zone now. And then we can assess the frustration and boredom levels. If a kiddo is frequently frustrated, if they're frequently avoiding a task, then it might be too difficult, right? It might be too outside of their zone, or they're just so bored they just don't want to do it because it's too easy, right? So if they seem bored and disengaged, right, it's probably too easy. So once we see that frustration level, that's where we can look at what it is that they need in that moment. Is it scaffolding? So scaffolding is just temporary support, right? When we think of scaffolding on buildings, it's just temporarily there to help get the job done. So it's temporarily there to help kids complete the task. Now, again, we're not going to tell them what to do. We don't even give hints. Don't even give hints because if we're giving hints, then they're never going to actually learn, I did it by myself. And they're not going to get that yes factor, like, yes, I did it. That's a huge dopamine hit. And that really helps drive their motivation. So being there to ask those open-ended questions. What's next? What do you think you need to do? Right? What have you done? What else could you try? That kind of thing is helpful. Maybe we're modeling how to approach the problem as well and doing some self-talk, right? That can be helpful. So we really want to make sure that we're asking open that they're thinking what to do, and we want to encourage self-assessment. So ask kids, how do you feel about this task? This is one thing that I often do right before we're going to go into something. Is it too easy, too hard? Is it too right? On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think this is? 10 is too hard, 1 is too easy. Kids are really often good judges of their own comfort levels and difficulty levels, and that feedback can really guide you to find the right challenge, right? So if we're doing a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is this? And 10's impossible. Then we can say, if they say 8, okay, awesome. What makes it an 8 and not a 10? Because there's something in here that you see is doable. But what could we do maybe to bump it down to a 6 or a 7? Make it slightly easier, slightly more manageable. Now they're really good at giving us some insight into how we can scaffold that task so it's not out of that zone. Okay. We really want to be good at using feedback loops. So we can give constructive feedback, what went well. Ideally, we're doing it together. What went well? What could do better? We're going to brainstorm those things that can be improved on or that they could try differently, just so that they can understand that even if they didn't finish the task or solve the problem or, do the handstand, they're understanding their progress and what steps can they take next, right? And kind of build on that. So we're going to do these things and really collaborate with them too, just understanding how frustrating and challenging things are. So once we have an idea of what that zone is, we're going to provide balanced challenges within the child's zone. Now, I love the challenges to help motivate them. It could be just offering choices between tasks. I remember in a classroom once, it was a grade 1 classroom, and they were learning to tell time. And so kids had the choice. Did you want to use a digital clock with the numbers, or did you want to use an analog clock, right? So kids would be pushing themselves, if they already knew how to read a digital clock, to read the analog clock. Maybe if they're doing math homework, they can choose between some standard problems, but maybe there's, a bonus question, right? Some more challenging ones that are sort of bonus ones. And they can self-assess their readiness and gauge in their optimal level. Now, the focus here is not on getting it right, especially when we're just teaching this framework of trying to challenge themselves. Okay, so I would say they get points rather than right or wrong, points for trying something. So if it's easy and we know that they can do their multiplications tables, no problem, they might get a 1 for completing that whole sheet. But if they're stretching to learn long division, let's say, maybe they're getting 5 points, whether or not they get it right, but they're actually trying. They're actually trying to get there, and we can see that, right? And then bonus, maybe if they go back, they learn from their mistake and go back, fix it, and to get the right mistake, bonus marks, right? That's where we really want to do. And if it's not marks, like it's points or something like that. Breaking tasks down, certainly, but I would teach them how to do that. We're always breaking tasks down and going step by step for kids. They need to learn how to do that themselves. Okay. So there's lots of tricks. One of the things that I often teach is circling the verb. So if they have, an instruction, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe there are those steps. And oftentimes, even when we're building furniture and things like that, there is those steps. But, maybe it's a science experiment. So I want them to scan through, the whole paragraph of all of the instructions that they need to do. And I want to circle all the verbs: pour, stir, add, wait. Okay. Then they're going to go back and scan again and just underline what they're verbing. Okay. So, stir the water in the oil, add food coloring, right? So we can just look at those things. So then now they know how to break things down. So when they can break things down into small, manageable parts, kids can start focusing on one step at a time, and it's very clearly highlighted for them. It just makes that seemingly impossible task feel really achievable. We're always going to encourage and even expect and celebrate that try again approach. That's really important. I don't want them doing the easy worksheet that they're going to get 100% on. They're not learning, right? I want them to be able to go through, try something, make mistakes, Know that that's part of the learning process. Go back, identify what the mistake was, what they learned, and now they're getting those extra bonus points, right? Extra grades. So this is expected that you're going to try again. So that really helps them see challenges as opportunities, right? Opportunities to learn and improve rather than a failure and a mistake. We also really want to help kids set really small incremental goals that build on each other. Again, another thing that video games do. You don't just go start, fighting Bowser right away. You go through each of these baby steps so that you can learn, the different powers and the different whatever else part of the video game. So if a kid is learning to read, maybe we're going to start with short sentences. Then we're going to go to paragraphs. I mean, a lot of times we do this anyways, right? And then gradually increase to longer passages. So every step feels like progress and maintains their motivation, but it's helpful to visually track all of that. You can play games, right? Playful activities. That can be really helpful just to challenge kids' skills. It doesn't matter what it is. I just every day want them being challenged. So maybe it's a timed puzzle. Maybe you're building challenges. Maybe it's creative storytelling just to push their cognitive and emotional boundaries. When the task feels too difficult, maybe for them, in the moment, don't give up and say, "Ooh, that was too hard." We don't want to instill that story, right? Okay, so how are you feeling, right? How can we problem solve rather than you stepping in or you letting them give up or avoid? Help them go through that problem solving process. We're definitely going to validate their experience, but we're putting it back in their lap, right? Again, those open-ended questions. What did you do already? What do you think we could try next? What's another way to look at this problem? What are some ideas, right? It just helps them think critically and flexibly and start coming up with their own strategies for tackling, this, but then also future challenges. We know the best strategies in any given situation, it doesn't matter what it is, it's the ones that kids come up with themselves. So we're just there as guides for them to identify what's actually going to be helpful. Group work, if you're in a classroom or if you've got other kids, group work, peer learning, that can be a great way to work within the zone. Kids often feel comfortable when they're working with someone, right? We're going to work through similar tasks with peers or with someone. And they can learn from each other's strategies and successes. That's going to be really important too. In the class, I do like grouping kids with different abilities together. That's helpful. And then assigning roles based on their interests, based on their strengths, right? So we can make sure that each role is suited for them and slightly challenging for them. What might be easy for one student, could be really hard for another, and then they're getting discouraged and feeling, I'm not smart enough or whatnot. We don't want that to happen. The more advanced students who can help those with struggle, but we're giving the students who are struggling, but they have different tasks for their own level of challenge, right? So we want to just make sure everyone is engaging in their zone. So that's important. It does take a lot of front loading for sure, but once you get into this, you can start seeing, and kids can even start identifying their roles and their jobs and those types of things. But even creating different stations or challenges, that kind of vary in complexity. And then kids can choose which station they feel ready for, which level, a beginner's, intermediate, advanced, right? Just like when we go skiing, there's the green runs, the blue runs for intermediate, and then the black diamonds. So we're just encouraging them to challenge themselves without the pressure. I'll put a bunch of show notes, ideas in the show notes just to try, um, different ideas. I usually give way too many ideas, which I know can be overwhelming, but just take a look, and try a few of the ideas. There's puzzle and logic challenges that you could do, right? So maybe a starter beginner would just be a simple puzzle, right? And then maybe the intermediate would be a Sudoku or a Tanagram or something like that. And then maybe the advanced, the black level, the black diamond might be a create your own escape room or something like that. I love doing those types of things. For teens, maybe it's real life challenges, maybe like, researching car insurance. I don't know. It could be something like that. Writing a story. I mean, all the kids in school have to write. So maybe the easy beginner green run would be filling in the blank with picture prompts, right? And then the intermediate would be rewriting a familiar story, but with a twist ending. And then the black diamond, creating their own story, but maybe they have to use challenging words within that. Teens, again, we could maybe have them teach us about a topic that they're interested in, right? It could be coding, it could be a social issue, it could be a new hobby. Explaining something, teaching others really helps reinforce their understanding and also helps boost that motivation and confidence, right? Maybe they're picking a current event and presenting the pros and cons without any bias, just so that they can analyze, different viewpoints. That's a really important life skill. Always incorporating real life skills is always helpful. Financial literacy, I think, would be a great one, right? So maybe younger kids, it's identifying coins. Maybe they're going to start matching amounts, right? All kids need to learn this. And then maybe they're making change for a transaction or figuring out how much change they're going to get back, or maybe they're going to plan a little budget for a shopping trip. And then for teens, it would be solving real world financial problems, maybe interest or investments or I don't know, business planning, a little business side on the side or something, right? Daily life challenges, just always looking for these, right? There's stuff you can probably throw in every day. So maybe it's, starting simple, like following a routine, right? Or practicing something like tying their shoes. Right. And then we stretch to the blue run, right? The intermediate. Maybe it's creating a plan for themselves for completing a multi-step chore, or maybe it's planning a meal all the way from finding the recipe to writing and getting the grocery, like writing a grocery list, going and getting the groceries, maybe even cooking the meal. The black diamond run might be not having a recipe, right? Making dinner without that recipe. Maybe it's fixing something that needs to be fixed around the house. I mean, there's so many different things that we can do, whether it's academically or socially or just in every day, but really be responsive to how kids are reacting to those challenges, right? If they're consistently excelling, increase that difficulty. If they're struggling too much, then we can talk with them about how we can make it, a little bit more approachable for them, right? So again, that scale of 1 to 10, right? Brainstorm lots of different ideas. How can we bring it down from an 8 to a 6 or a 7, right? Rather than us swooping in saying it's too hard. We don't want to do that. And then they can choose the challenge that they want to do. And maybe we're going to brainstorm a whole bunch of different ideas, rate them all on a scale of 1 to 10, and then kids can choose where they want to start. I doubt they'll want to start with the 10, but I really doubt they're going to start with the 1 or 2 as well. They'll probably find that sweet spot themselves, right? That's really important. So, and then you can have points, right? Few points, very few, 1 point, half a point for the easy stuff, but big points for the harder stuff. Where do you want to start, right? And just knowing the harder it is, the faster your brain's going to learn. You might be surprised, right? When you set things up like that, kids are probably really willing to challenge themselves. It's when you're forcing them to go, okay, go do this, right? We just got to make sure we've got a strong motivator. And that's a great way to do it, having predictions and seeing how hard it's going to be. And they get to choose, where they want to go. And then maybe having that external reinforcement, like the point system too. We're going to just see them, progress because they want to get that next rung, that next challenge. And then we're always focusing on the effort put into tackling a challenge, right? It's not about the final outcome. We're celebrating the perseverance, the value of trying, right? Even when that success isn't immediate, bonus points for doing it again and trying again. So definitely create visual charts or trackers just so kids really can see that progress over time. Because that's going to be really motivating for them because they can see how far they've come, right? And that effort leads to improvement. And so we're going to individualize those trackers. We're never going to do it against someone else. So if there's siblings, for example, with an older sibling, right? If we're doing it based on ability and outcome level, the older sibling, well, one of the siblings might always be ahead. Same thing in a classroom. It's not based on the same thing that everyone's doing. It's individualized, how hard the task is for you. And you're going to earn points based on the challenges that it presents for you. So any child at any ability can progress as quickly as everybody else, right? As much as they challenge themselves. Now I'm going to talk about making mistakes in coming weeks. Because, making mistakes really can throw a wrench into things emotionally because they can get really frustrated and overwhelmed. And so then they want to give up, right? So we want to make sure we're addressing the emotional zones too. I've been talking about the zones of development, kind of thinking physically and cognitively, but the emotional piece is going to be important. We know discussing minor setbacks before tackling really big, significant emotional challenges helps build resilience gradually, but I'll be talking about emotion regulation and stretching kids emotionally in coming weeks. So I'll leave it there for today, right? We just want to always make sure we're challenging kids. We want to keep them motivated and engaged when we do so, just to make sure they're growing and learning to strengthen their confidence, building that emotional resilience. All of those are really important to navigate, life's hurdles. Because right now, everybody's sort of crumbling under these challenges. So we really want them to rise up to it. But check out the show notes. I've got lots of different ideas for different types of challenges. Thank you for tuning in today. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to share it with others who might want help supporting kids to be resilient and motivated. Until next time, make sure you keep pushing those kids and help them be bold and courageous. And I will see you next time.